I'm so excited to see so many people here on this Friday in February for the session on how to prepare board members and volunteers to ask for gifts. Y'all, show of hands, how many of you have inherited a volunteer you did not recruit? I feel like oftentimes that's the scenario we find ourselves in, right? We did not recruit this person. We feel like it's a bait and switch. If we try to ask them, they're already doing so much for us. How can we possibly ask them to do one more thing, right? Well, guess what? I'm here today to talk about how we can do that. So, whether or not you are having asking as a new expectation, or you are newly recruiting volunteers to your team, board members or committee members of some sort, um, we have to make sure that we are consistent in some of the key things that help us inspire them to do the work for us, right? So, couple of thoughts, if we can move into that next slide, please, Trish. Couple of thoughts on this. Always, always, always start with the why, right? And let's be transparent. So this may be that you are just starting out and you need to build your why on why you could possibly be asking a volunteer to help ask for gifts. You may have been an organization that's been around for a long time and you have a change that has triggered a need to dig a little deeper. Your why might be, guess what? This is something we've always tried to do, but we're just revamping up the efforts. It's the new year. We know that there's a need and we're going to be more intentional this year, right? Whatever the why is, I think if we can be transparent about it, that is important, right? If we want to continue to have greater impact, our funding model must evolve. We've been focusing on fundraiser events and allowing people to utilize that as the tool. And this year, we know to make a true transformational difference, we are going to focus on major gifts. And this is what that means for us and the team, right? Or, hey, guess what? We've had a crisis and we need to go to the community if we want to be able to raise our game and serve the same people that we used to serve. We're going to have to dig a little deeper. Whatever that might be, right? People handle change best when it is clearly explained, not ambiguous, not dismissed as, oh, this is just something we've always been doing. Maybe people won't notice, right? This is a change from how we initially started and framed our volunteer roles, and we want to talk with you about what this change looks like. What if we went to the people who had been recruited and said, you've been doing amazing work, and our needs have changed. So I want to talk to you about how you can help us. And here's the reason why we're making this change. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be different, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Think about how much different things might be, right? Let's move on to that next slide. Please, Trish. I think if we can connect the ask to our mission, it helps put volunteers at ease. Most people, when you use the word fundraising or asking someone for money, they want to run the other way, right? That is just sort of human nature. Besides us, right? A lot of people are very, very uncomfortable with that, but they are very comfortable with our missions. They're giving their time, they're giving their treasure, they're giving their energy because they're passionate about your cause, right? So rather than focusing and really leaning in on, hey, we are going to have to ask people you know for money because our organization needs more money to do the work that we're doing. What if we flip that script and we say, asking is going to help us expand our impact, right? We're going to go out to people that we know who know us and tell our story, and we're going to help expand our impact. But we have to ask people for help or we're not going to get anywhere, right? What if we let our volunteers know that asking is a sign of leadership? It's showing your commitment to a cause that you care about. It's making you a leader in this community. Asking is about connection, right? This work does not just happen. We need to connect with people. We need to tell our story. And by asking for their support, asking them if they would help us make an impact, that's going to make our mission more possible and stronger, right? And guess what, guys? Asking people to help is giving them an opportunity to live out their values. So by framing it in this way with our volunteers and letting them know that the number one reason people don't give is because they weren't asked. The number one reason people don't serve or help in the way that we want them to is because we didn't ask them. Have we asked our volunteers to do the work that we hope they'll do? Or have we just sat there and thrown our hands up and said, "Ugh, our board isn't helping us at all. We're having to do all this work." Maybe we never asked them, right? So asking on so many levels is an opportunity for people to live out their values. Both the prospects that we're asking for gifts and the volunteers we're asking to serve. Next slide, please. We need to redefine asking to reduce resistance, right? We want to make sure that people understand there's a spectrum of engagement. And asking does not necessarily mean that they have to be the one to ask for the gift. There is an entire spectrum of how they can help us as philanthropy and development officers make the ask, right? We know that there's a lot that goes into an ask. Yes, somebody does have to make that direct and specific ask. A real person has to do that. Oftentimes that's us. But guess what? Sometimes volunteers flourish in that space. The first starting point on that spectrum of engagement, and something that for me is just always a non-negotiable, is if someone cannot make their own personally significant and meaningful commitment and financial contribution, they're going to have a really difficult time having other people do it. So that's where we got to start, right? That is the step one on the spectrum of engagement. So if we have not even gotten our board or our volunteers to make their own gift, that's a problem. That can delay our work. So we sometimes make excuses and say, but they're giving their time and their time is their gift. Absolutely. But I can tell you from vast amount of experience that the moment someone makes their own personal financial contribution, things change, right? They are now invested. They understand what a donor goes through and asks the tough questions, and they have wrestled with the things that they needed answered to come to a comfortable place to make a personal sacrifice. So that is where we have to start, right? If we go get no further, that's beginning point, right? But opening doors by setting a meeting with people that they already know. That is another way that people can be involved with the ask, right? If we just say, if you could just set me one meeting with someone who you know, who knows you, who trusts you, who's going to be a little more likely to just hear our story, hear what we've got going on, and you actually set that meeting and we sit down together with them and just share why you're involved, that is step one, right? Opening those doors. I never want to have to make a cold call. I always want to have that door opened, that relationship warmed up. I don't want a volunteer to have to make a cold call. We should all know enough people and be just one degree of separation away that we continue to work our way through our prospect lists, right? So opening those doors. Sharing personal stories and why they give. Oftentimes, people feel like they have to have all these magic things to say. They've got to know all the details on the project, what you're going to do with the money. And that's important information to sort of give people confidence. But at the end of the day, if they're just able to say, I am a volunteer for this organization, I give my time and I give personally because fill in the blank, whatever they chose to do that, that is enough to give us in that door the opportunity to say, here's how you could get involved as well. Would you consider a gift of this? Just like your friend, right? Hosting two-way conversations. So often in fundraising, organizations get stuck on, well, we've got to send out appeal mailings and we have to send, and it's one-way communication. This is our work, this is the good work we're doing. Volunteers really establish the opportunity for us to have a two-way conversation. We talk a lot about wanting to have a relationship with our donors. We want to hear what's important to them. Going back to the opportunity to live out their values. If we are not asking them questions in part of a conversation and having an opportunity while sitting in front of them to do so, we are not learning anything about what makes them tick. We might be missing the mark on what we're sharing about our work because we haven't had that two-way conversation. So, really focusing in on how your volunteers can help connect you for a two-way conversation. Maybe it's a discovery call, maybe it's a cultivation opportunity, maybe it is actually an ask, right? But having two-way communication is so important. Another way people can get involved is by co-asking with a staff member or another volunteer. We are not asking someone to go and do this beginning, middle, and end all on their own. I have had some tremendous volunteers who can and do that, and that's amazing. But we've got to start by getting people comfortable along the way in teams, right? And that could be with us as a staff member, it could be with another volunteer, and then they gain confidence and get much more comfortable continuing to open up their networks, right? And I know I started with the make the direct and specific ask. Some volunteers very comfortable with doing this. We know as fundraisers how important it is to be specific, to show the donor how they can make a gift, right? I have this form. I filled it out for you. I took the liberty of checking these boxes because that's what I thought that you might be interested in. But let's talk about this. Here's how you can actually do this physically, tangibly, or click on this QR code. It's going to take you to the web page. You can join our annual gifts club, right? There are so many different tools that we can do by being specifically and making the direct ask. So, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake.
All right. Well, if we've partially convinced you that you should hopefully try to re-engage both your board and volunteers in a fundraising capacity and get them sort of activated as assets for your organization, here is the number one mistake to avoid. So we've seen this happen, and maybe you've made this mistake, or someone who had your position before you have done this. We say, yes, okay, I'm gonna talk to my board members, we're gonna empower them, they're gonna be super excited. And we say, all right, everybody go find the people in their network who could give money, tell them all about the mission and how great we are, and then ask for the gift, and then we'll meet back here next month. If everyone would just get 5 people, we'll be wrapped up with this campaign in 3 weeks. It's going to be awesome. And then we're really surprised that no one does anything. The truth is that most people are uncomfortable with one or more parts of this kind of three-part continuum of fundraising. There's connecting, cultivating, and closing. And if you've been with us for any amount of time, you've seen us try to divide our volunteers and our strengths of our volunteers into these three categories. Connectors are those who identify prospects and make introductions, set up meetings, not just like, oh yeah, tell so-and-so that I called you, but sending a mutual email or a mutual text message or calling that person saying, hey, I think you should hear these people out. Can the three of us have lunch? Like a true connection where they're actually doing the setting of the appointment in many cases. Cultivator are the people who actually talk about the mission. They say, this is why our charity is great. They're explaining the need. They can, talk about why they're involved and why this is the charity they chose. Often great storytellers of like, this is the reason that I got involved in this thing. This is my backstory to this, and have all the details surrounding the project. Not making the ask, but just kind of setting it up. And some people are not comfortable with that process either. Closers are the ones who actually make the ask and say, we'd love for you to consider a gift of blank or consider a pledge of blank. Some people are like, yes, I can connect you to my network, but I find it very awkward to ask my friends for money, so I'm just not going to do that. So instead of asking every single person to do all three of these things down to each person, we're going to say, okay, the people who are good connectors, we're going to make a bunch of connections, and that's their job. The people who are great cultivators, we're going to have them go on the calls with us and explain why they got involved. Having a volunteer in the room when you're asking for money is so powerful because they're on their own time. Like if I'm a paid fundraiser, it's like, yeah, it's great. You said all the right words and I get why you're asking, but you're being paid to be here to ask me for money. Whereas a volunteer who's like, look, I'm giving, I just want you to join me. I think this is really important. That says way more and speaks a lot more volumes than someone who's paid. So not to say that we can't use our paid staff, obviously should. That's kind of their first job, but having that cultivator in the room makes a huge difference. And that's a role that a lot of your board or volunteers can play. Closers are, of course, people say, "Oh yeah, I'll ask anybody for money. I don't care." We have often the fewest of these, but you occasionally get lucky with someone who's ready to knock down doors. People can be more than one. Obviously, we have a little personality, assessment quiz that you can take to kind of figure it out. But I would bet most of you in here can look through and kind of say, "Well, I'm probably more this and more this." You can kind of self-assess and see which ones you're strong in. All of your board and all of your volunteers have a propensity in one or more of these. We didn't make this stuff up. This is from Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point. It's a wonderful psychology book about it's sort of related to sales, but have adopted it for fundraising over the last couple decades. But if you do nothing else, as you assign out a fundraising role to your team, to your volunteers, maybe consider dividing them up into these separate groups or having them do two of the three instead of all three and watch as they're already more comfortable because they're doing something that they have more comfort and skill sets for and not doing the thing that they're most uncomfortable with. All right, next slides. So the next thing that we want to do is clearly communicate, especially new volunteer expectations. The root of all conflict. This is true of businesses, this is true of boards, this is true in relationships and friendships. The root of all conflict is a mismatch of expectations. People are only mad when they think one thing or they expect one thing and you do another thing. If you clearly communicate what's going to happen, you can resolve a lot of issues on the front end. And it's not because we're bad people, but we tend to undersell the job. We're like, oh, we just got to get Marty involved. She's so well connected and she could really get us. We're just going to downplay how, oh yeah, it's super easy. You don't have to actually show up. You only have to go to 2 meetings a year. No, you don't have to ask for money. And we're like, but if we can just get her in the room and then we explain it to her, we'll hit her with the switcheroo right at the end there. And then she'll agree to work for us. It's like, no, Marty's just going to be upset. She's going to feel misled. So even though it's tough and it's a tougher sell on the front end, we'll end up with the right people in the room and the right people on your board, the right people on your fundraising committee, your development council, whatever form your volunteers take. If we clearly communicate everything on the front end and then let people who are not interested self-select out, that gives us a seat to open up to someone who actually will be productive. It will take longer to recruit people this way. We can't like in 30 days get our whole group together. But in the long run, you'll have people who will actually stick around. It's like doing it right on the front end, building the house out of bricks instead of straw. Even though it's going to take longer, it's going to last longer too. So the first is to have actual job descriptions and roles, written job descriptions and roles. And if you're a client of ours and you don't have these for your teams, we're happy to make these for you. We have templates for all these, but not just to kind of describe the role in kind of relative wishy-washy terms, but to say, hey, here's a one-pager. This is what the goal of this committee is, or the goal of the board, or the goal of the fundraising committee. Here is exactly what we're asking you to do. Here is exactly how much time it's going to take. And then the result of that is going to be this. And this is what we're going to provide you in order to make you successful. And we have that written out and we update those regularly and we send them out to everyone before they say yes or no. We also share written talking points. So when they're talking about the charity, they feel armed with some information. We think, oh yeah, they've been with us for years. They've been giving for years. And we assume they know as much about our mission as we do. In many cases, they might, but in most cases, they don't. We live this every day. So if we're going to work, we're obviously interfacing with our charity, our mission, our nonprofit very frequently. And we know a lot because we just absorb it naturally. We know more than anybody. Even if we think our board or our volunteers are really well versed in what we're trying to do, just giving them a few bullet points and updating those regularly is huge. So just having those written talking points that they can go out and use makes them feel empowered and a lot more safe to have something to hide behind in some cases. The next is we see people trying to send out a mass email and say like, here's the expectations for the group. And I can get it done in 20 minutes because I can have ChatGPT write it and then I will email it to my listserv and it's great. Instead, we want to truly go one at a time with our volunteers. We always say, try to treat your donors like volunteers and your volunteers like donors. This is a great example of that, where we're trying to say people are individuals. They're going to have different worries, they're going to have different thoughts, they're going to have strengths, they're going to have different ideas. All of these things can be better customized with one-on-one conversations. And that way there's no mismatch of expectations. Again, it always comes back to that, to sit down and say, well, I sent you the email. You knew the expectations from the beginning. I clearly outlined it. Like I personally get over 100 emails a day. So if something is in an email, I probably get it. But the fact that I could remember it 3 weeks from now when I've got 100 other things going on, probably not. So to sit down and actually have, as Marty described, a two-way conversation about those expectations, about the role, with that written job description that you go over together, sets up those expectations so that when they show up to that first meeting or they come to report in, if you're working with them individually, they know exactly what they're doing and why. And that just helps you kind of keep that longevity. The last thing is have a conversation about the change versus sending an email if you're going to make a change. As Marty mentioned, probably we inherited some people who were like, I signed up to be a volunteer. I did not sign up to be a fundraiser. And we're saying, well, now you're a fundraiser because that's what we need most out of you. Instead of sending out an email to your board saying, hey, y'all, I went to this webinar by Pride Philanthropy and they gave us some great ideas. So here's what we're going to do. Don't do that. Instead, try to talk to people one at a time and start with the why, saying, hey, we really want to activate our board in order to do X, Y, and Z and blank, blank, blank. Here is where I think you'd be super valuable. I know that you know a lot of people. We don't need you to actually ask for money or go on these fundraising calls, but if you can get a couple people in front of us a month, it would really be valuable. Here is a list that we can start with. You know one on this list, or you can come up with your own list. We're obviously going to talk to all the board members about this, but I wanted to kind of gauge your comfort with this before I proceeded. And then let them ask questions and voice concerns and go back and forth like that. So having that conversation instead of just here's the big change that's coming so that you do it one. Again, it's going to take more time, but I promise you in the long run, it's going to be way less work in the aggregate. Next slide, please. All right. Another big mistake we see a lot is not providing the right support and tools. So the first is training. So fact, most professional fundraisers don't have formal training. So you think the volunteers have any clue how to do this? No possible way. They might have a natural propensity for it, and they just have that gift where they can ask for money, and they've done it lots of times, or they've chaired multiple campaigns or whatever. But if we don't provide them with some level of training of like, if you're going to be a connector, here are the things you do. If you're going to be a cultivator, here are the things you do. Closer, here's the things that you say and don't say. Here's how you get to a gift. All these things don't have to be intrusive into their time. Like we would say, most organizations maybe get this twice a year so that as new board members and new volunteers rotate on, they get updated training. The ones who've already heard it, it's a good refresher. It's not that complicated, the process of going and soliciting and finding prospects and doing the whole thing. It's not overly complicated, but there are some very clear do's and don'ts, and just providing your team with what those are, hugely helpful so they know what to expect. But most organizations don't do this. It's like, oh, duh, training is great. It's like, yes, if you provide any level of fundraising training for your volunteers and board, that puts you in like the top 0.5% of charities, I promise you. So that's a huge box. It's an easy one to check. It takes a couple hours a year to do, and it will definitely pay off most literally. The next is having some type of scripts and talking points. What we find is when we give a script, they'll try the script at first, and then it'll kind of morph into their own language. The script is more just like a safety net, a crutch to kind of get them started of these are the kind of things we say. So sometimes we'll do bullet points of like, here's how you start a conversation. Here's how you move towards a gift. Here's how you blank, blank, and blank. But all goes back to providing that training. They're just going to want to know, hey, I'm happy to help, but I just need some more direction. People also sometimes will be afraid to admit that they can't do something. They're like, well, I don't really feel comfortable asking, even to set up a fundraising meeting, but I don't want to tell them that because I'm kind of embarrassed. And that's a feeling of a lot of people. So they're just not going to say anything and they'll make excuses and just kind of drag along and not do a lot. If we can provide them with, here's exactly what you say, or here's a version of it, make this your own, of course, put this in your own words, but here's generally what to say, and you'll find success doing this. Makes a huge difference. Having some kind of either print materials or videos to share as a leave behind is helpful. Again, they're not going to know as much as you will about your organization. Checking in with them, especially in the beginning, we call them briefs or debriefs. So if they're going to go approach a donor or they're going to go try to set up a call, talk to them ahead of time saying, hey, I know you're going to approach Marty. You feeling comfortable with that? What do you need? Can I send you our case for support? Do you need a copy of that you can take? What's your plan with them? And then as soon as they have the call, doing that deep. We'll talk about reinforcing good behavior in a minute, but this is a really easy one. Most people, when they're being supervised in a volunteer role, just want to feel heard and supported. They're kind of fine with whatever the work is, but if they're staff person who they're assigned to is hard to reach and they're not easily connected, that's the fastest way to make someone feel like what their work is not important enough or they're being shoved to the side. So just giving them just a little bit of open access to your primary staff person goes a long way and gets you most of the way there. And the final thing is follow up. We sometimes, even with the best of intentions, training, scripts, all of it, we'll send it all out. We'll say, okay, we got 6 weeks before the next meeting. And we get to the next meeting and like less than 25% of people have done anything. And again, it's just because they get busy. This is not their full-time job like it is ours, and that's totally fine. But what we can do is have some touch points one-on-one across the thing where we email and say, hey, I know Marty was on your list. I know Michaela was on your list. How is that going? Do you need anything? Oh, that's right. I was supposed to call her. Yeah, let me do that today. So just having a couple of touch points in the beginning as you're forming that habit and getting the engine going goes a long way. So just having these little providing tools, providing training, providing scripts, it just makes them feel more comfortable and puts more guardrails around what they're doing so that they don't have to guess. They're like, here's exactly what I do. Here's how I do it. Here's my deadline. It's about 2 total hours of work and I have 4 weeks. Most people can figure that out. So that gets you much, and not everyone's going to participate perfectly, but this gets you 80% of the way there. All right, last slide here is to celebrate successes. So we naturally will automatically kind of reward the outputs. Like even if we're talking about like today on our forum, we're talking about, hey, look at all this awesome client news that we have. Look at all these clients that we have are raising 10, 25, 50, $100,000. It was a bunch of inputs that led to that. We can't say like, oh, I'm going to set a bunch of output goals and not build a system that works toward that. Like all of those successes you saw on that slide are from people on this call in our network who did a lot of things right for a long time to get to that output. So when we're trying to reinforce good behavior, we want to do the inputs, like when they're having conversations and taking swings and making outreach and all the things we want them to do, even if it doesn't result in money, we do want to celebrate that. And at each meeting, talk about how many wins we had in terms of conversations had, donor touch points, cultivation touch points, even if we're not getting gifts, because the behavior that we're trying to reinforce is not bring in money. That's the output. The behavior we're trying to reinforce is we want them to do stuff. We want them to make connections. We want them to go on calls, and we want them to share in asks in some combination. So we're trying to reinforce the input, not the output, and celebrating those wins with donor conversations, co-asks, introductions. Someone's first ask is big. It's very nerve-wracking for people. Someone's first no is big and they feel defeated saying, yeah, we got to know, but we're just going to keep going. Like we definitely would have got to know if we didn't ask. And sometimes people come back a couple years later and say, well, it was a no, but it really just meant not right now. They're paying on a pledge. And as soon as they're done with that pledge, we'll re-engage with them. So just that progress of we're doing things and we're checking inputs and systems off the list is far more important than celebrating the actual money that comes. If you do all these things, you can celebrate the money that comes in because it just will happen. Like if you do enough inputs, it's just going to happen. And the thing that we always say, and we'll say it over and over, is the number one reason people don't give is because they weren't asked. This is true anecdotally. This is true in all the surveys that go out every year. Most of the time people say, I would have given or I would have given more, but the charity didn't ask me for it, so I didn't think they needed it. And that's one of those things that we just want to be very, very cognizant of. So with that, we have a couple minutes left here, about 5 minutes left. I want to take any specific questions. I know that y'all have been asking questions in the chat. I appreciate our team answering those as we go. But if you have any more questions, you can either unmute yourself and we can address those now, or you can type them in the chat and we'll do our best to cover.
And I just want to say thank y'all for helping each other out. I loved the dialogue and the sharing amongst yourselves on some of those questions. So no other questions?
Oh, we got one. Elena, what about board members or volunteers who say they'll do a task and then don't? Marty, do you have a good answer to
Ooh,
this one?
yeah. Yeah. How many of us have had that happen, right?
Yeah.
I think we need to, in that instance, we have to get to the bottom of why, right? Kind of just go back to and I think we need to look in the mirror first, right? We need to assume that it's on us. I think we have a tendency to say they're disengaged, they don't do anything, it's on them. And it's still our job to motivate, inspire, equip, empower, give them the tools they need to be successful because we are asking them to give us their time. They're not paid to do it, right? So I think we have to go back to sort of the steps. First of all, I always when people say they didn't do it, they said they were going to do it, my first question is always, have they made their own personal gift? And full stop right there. If they haven't, that's why. 100% of the time, that is always why if they did not make progress. That doesn't mean somebody might not still do the work that hasn't made their gift, but if people are complaining, if they haven't, I always ask that question first. If they have, then we have to dig further, right? Then we have to see, have we not given them talking points? Have we not provided them with enough information? Have we not helped them enunciate their why? Um, there's going to be something along the way that there's a gap in. And I think we just have to be patient and we have to continue to sort of water the plant, right? But my first question is always going to be, have they made their own personal gift? Because if they haven't, they're still wrestling with whatever they need to wrestle with, which is going to cause inactivity. So I hope that helps without going through the entire presentation again. If you just sort of go back to the steps, have we done everything that we could do? Would it be amazing if people just did it after one time through? Yes. Is that the reality? No. Most of the time, our volunteers are going to absorb one or two of the things that we say, right? So I know there's some more questions coming up. Let's see. Sorry, guys, I
Oh, how
can't
to
even.
avoid the data breach? Yeah, great question. So it's easy things on the front end for y'all about changing your passwords regularly, being cognizant of phishing scams and that kind of thing. So we can only do so much on the consumer side. We have to trust that our like CRM partners are going to do their best. It's nothing to do with like size of security. Like one of the biggest data breaches in fundraising history was Blackbaud, which is the biggest, most Goliath company, and they had a huge data breach, and lots of organizations had to apologize on their behalf. So we can do our best to have like good security hygiene on our own computers and phones and be cognizant of the types of scams and phishing that are aware. And then, as Jared said, have kind of a contingency plan in place if something does ever happen. Because, the large Microsoft will have breaches. There's no version of our future that doesn't involve those, unfortunately. Marty, can I plug one thing really fast?
Yes, Jake, go
So
for it.
it is February 6th, which means it has been exactly 1 year since the launch of our YouTube channel. So if you have heard me talk and think, I want to hear him talk so much more, which I hope so, you can go over to our YouTube. I literally have hundreds of hours of content that are keyword searchable via YouTube. It's all for free. So, like all of our best stuff, all of the information that we have, you can consume it all for free on YouTube. There's no ads, there's no nothing. So, I just want to say thank you to all the people who subscribed in the first year. We're going to go at it another year. We post every single day. We post a long video every single week. So if you'd like to learn more about fundraising and can consume it passively, please go over and check out our YouTube. I work very, very hard on it, and I'm very, very grateful for everyone who's tuned in over our first year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you would like to have more of a two-way conversation with us, and I've not already done that, feel free to scan that QR code.